What's going on, my friends? I hope you're all doing amazing. We just got back from Singapore and it was an incredible trip. The humidity there is pretty intense when it comes to Australia. Australia gets really hot, but the humidity isn't the same like it is in Singapore. Beautiful country. We're going to be talking about the lenses because I took the ZV-E1, I took the A7IV and the A6000, but we'll talk about the lenses that I loved using with the ZV-E1, and not just with Singapore, but with here in Australia and when I went to Japan as well just a couple of weeks ago. We will talk about what lenses I love and what lenses would potentially be good for this and that I don't actually have, but I've used in the past as well. So first one, we're going to be talking about the all-rounder lens, and I know you guys have probably used this one before. This is the G1, the Tamron 28-75 version 1. So this is an f2.8 lens. You slap it on here, you've got such a versatile range. Sure, 28 millimeters isn't wide for a lot of people. People generally like that 24 millimeters. That's probably where you'd go the Sigma, or you would go the Sony 24-70 GM. Really just depends on your budget, but this thing has not done me wrong. It's nice, sharp, wide open. The autofocus is nice and fast. Low chromatic aberration. I just love this thing, and there was just no need for me to upgrade or change to a different lens. I don't need the G2. I don't need the Sony 24-70 or the Sigma 24-70. This lens just does it all. It's fantastic. That wide open f2.8 gives really nice, soft, creamy backgrounds. Not as good as the Sony or the Sigma one, but nonetheless, it still works absolutely fine. And this lens pretty much stuck on the ZV-E1, especially when I did street photography and videography. Just that all-round versatility of this thing, it just worked perfect. Now, when it comes to wide-angle lenses, I actually use this one a lot, and I really, really love this lens. The 16-35 f4 PZ lens. Now, this lens is my newest one of the bunch. I pretty much got it with the ZV-E1. But it pairs perfectly. And f4, I don't care about f4 because when it comes to depth of field at 16 millimeters, you don't really get too much depth of field because you're trying to capture the grand architecture of the place, the landscape. You're trying to capture as much in the scene as possible, and f4, you want to make sure it's nice and sharp, and this thing is sharp wide open at f4. And when it comes to the 35 millimeters, didn't really use the 35 that much on this one, but the 16 mil I definitely did. It only came to when I was filming people and faces. I went to 35 because at 16 millimeters, when you get too close, it looks really distorted, and I do not recommend filming faces and people at 16 millimeters because it elongates the body and makes it just look really warped and not fun. But at the wide end at 16 millimeters, it is fantastic. And f4, like I said, if you want low light performance with the ZV-E1, you've got that second base at 12,800. So that's going to make it so much better and usable in low light situations. But hey, if you are in extremely dark situations, that's probably where the 16-35 G Master, the 2.8, would probably come in handy. Or I would definitely recommend getting a prime lens. And that's the next one that I want to talk about. And that is this. The Sigma 16mm lens. This is an f1.4. Now, yes, you're probably thinking, it's an APS-C lens, Jason. What's going on? With active steady shot, you can still get full frame coverage with almost no loss of resolution. You can see just a little bit on the edge there, but we're talking 0.5%. So that is really interesting and really good versatile lens on full frame. With that dynamic active stability, it's a 30% crop on top of this. So the 16mm lens ends up being about a 20.3 or whatever, 20.4 mil lens. So that is really, really interesting because this gives a really wide perspective, a wide open f1.4, and you get extremely good stability. Now, in saying that, that dynamic active stability isn't amazing when you're panning left and right, but if you are walking forward and back and want that wide open aperture with the wide lens, the Sigma 16-1 could actually be a really good option. But if you throw it into just regular active steady shot, it's about a 10% crop. You can see a little bit of vignetting, but still a very cheap f1.4 lens. Sigma 16 is the GOAT. So before we continue, give this video a thumbs up. That would be amazing. And obviously comment below. What is your thoughts on what lenses you use with your camera? What are you going to buy with the ZV-E1? Or what are you going to buy with your other Sony cameras? Let me know in the comments below. Now moving on to a wide lens that I've used before but don't have at the moment, and that is the Sony 11mm f1.8. Now that is an incredible wide lens, and same thing, if you use dynamic active steady shot, what is it, 30% on top of that, it ends up being about a 14-ish, 14.2, 14.3 millimeter lens. So that is really wide for extremely stable and an f1.8. So that could be extremely good for architecture, real estate, all those kind of things that you need that handheld stability. Even vlogging, you can vlog with that lens and you get a really wide 14mm lens. Now in terms of wide angle lenses, this is the Viltrox 13mm lens, which is an APS-C lens as well. This is active steady shot. So this is how wide you can physically get with the 13mm. And for vlogging, that's pretty good because you can show more of the background. It just really depends on what kind of look you're going for. But you know, 16 to 35 is your standard YouTuber sort of vlogging length because it has a little bit of versatility. So now we'll move on to normal focal lengths, and it's kind of wide but kind of not, and that's the lens that I'm using right now, the 24mm G Master lens. Now this lens I use in all my YouTube videos. This is my talking head one because it's pretty much at arm's length when I'm sort of reaching right here. It just gives me a nice sort of all-round wide perspective, but not too wide, not like a 16, not like a 20. A 24 is just like that sweet spot for me. I love the 24 and I use it a lot with the A7IV, and that pairs really well with the ZV-E1 as well. And if I am doing the talking head pieces, that 24mm goes on the ZV-E1 and I utilize that one, and it's really nice. It's sharp wide open, gives you really nice low light performance with that 1.4 aperture. I just love the lens. Now the next one is my new all-time favorite. Now I know the f1.4 35mm lens was my all-time favorite, but getting this 50mm lens has really hit the spot. The 50mm f1.2 GM. Now, I know a lot of people can't afford the f1.2, whereas the f1.4 is just a little bit more affordable, but you still get that wide open aperture at f1.4. I just went the f1.2 because it gives me that option to have a 1.2 aperture if I need it. I've been using this a lot on the Sony FX6, but also on the A7IV, the ZV-E1, and the FX3, but this pairs extremely well with the ZV-E1. Now, when it comes to street photography, portrait cinematography, videography, this is the lens that I use. It is incredible, and I pretty much don't take it off the ZV-E1. It's like glued to it. It's every time I do portrait videography, 50 frames per second because you got full frame 50. This thing is a beast because you've got that low light f1.2. You've got the depth of field of that f1.2 with 50mm. I love this lens. I really do. And it's something to consider. But like I said, Sony have the f1.4 if you really want, or you've got the 55 f1.8, or even the 50 f1.8. I don't really like the 50 f1.8. Amber's got that now. She uses it with the A7III. Now, on the long end of the telephoto range, the one lens that I don't have, but I used a lot in Japan, it was a borrowed lens, and I really want to buy it, and that's the 70-200 f2.8 G2. That lens is incredible. I pretty much just glued it to the ZV-E1 when it came to Japan and all those kind of things. Portraits, long shots, some landscape work. The 70-200 is just, it's unbeatable. It's much lighter. The autofocus is extremely fast and tacky. I need to buy that lens. I really am going to buy that lens because it's incredible. And that's one lens that you could probably consider if you're doing sports and wildlife videography. Fabulous, absolutely fantastic, because you've got that long end at 200mm. And like I said, if you do end up having that dynamic active steady shot, you can get a 30% on top of that 200mm as well. But it really depends on how you want to be utilizing that. If you want to be putting it on a tripod, you wouldn't have active steady shot or anything like that. But it's a fantastic lens, and it's got OSS inside the lens as well. So also I'd just like to mention that all these lenses that we're using here can be used on any Sony full frame E-mount. It pretty much applies to all those. It can obviously apply for APS-C as well, so do consider that. This isn't just for Sony ZV-E1, but I am talking about the Sony ZV-E1 because it is the newest camera. It is suited for vlogging, and I've been taking it to 2 different countries now, Japan and Singapore. But yeah, let's get back into the video. Now the next one is a bit of a niche lens, and I don't use it a lot, but when you use it, it's really, really good. And that is the Sony 200 to 600mm lens. This thing is an absolute beast and a saver when it comes to really long wildlife photography and videography, surfing, sports and action, all those kind of things. It's got really nice fast autofocus. It handles incredibly well. This lens is my go-to for all of those things. And when it comes to the ZV-E1, it's got that 12,800, so you can get some really nice low light performance because this is a 5.6 to 6.3, so it's not a super fast lens. Not a lot of telephoto lenses are, unless you get the G Master range, which, you know, the 400mm, which is a 2.8, or you can go, I think they've got a 500mm, or is that Canon? I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a good pair, and I did actually choose this one over the GM lens because the GM lens, it was like a 100 to 400. It didn't really hit that range that I wanted it to hit. So 200 to 600 just gives me a little bit extra on that top end, and when it comes to lower than 200, that's when I can just choose a completely different lens. But this thing is an absolute beast, and I love it. Now, the last bonus lens that I absolutely recommend, and when it comes to character and the overall just the feel and the vibe of the image it gives you, it's this one. It's the Helios 44-2. This thing is an absolute beast. I love it. I took it to Singapore, and I actually used it at Universal Studios when it was Azalea's birthday, just to give it that sort of warm, vintage vibe. It was just amazing. But the one thing you have to worry about with manual lenses is dynamic active steady shot, or active steady shot does not work, and that does suck. So as you can see here, I've got the 50mm f1.2 in regular IBIS, now in active steady shot mode, and it's actually quite decent. Now this is dynamic active steady shot. You can see it's a little bit shaky, but this is regular IBIS with the Helios, active steady shot with the Helios. Doesn't really make too much of a difference. And this is dynamic active steady shot. Same again, not too much of a difference. Now this is both dynamic active steady shots, pretty much doing the same, but the Helios is just not working as well as the Sony 50mm f1.2. You do have to be aware that the steady shot does not work with this one, but the image that you get out of it is just, it just gives it character. It's beautiful, it's not perfect, it's very imperfect, it's actually a very, you know, average looking image, but when it comes to character, this thing has it all. But let me know what your favorite lenses are in the comments below. I'd really like to know. Let me know what you actually use them for, if it sticks to that lens or you've got a whole bunch of lenses for different situations. These are the ones that I've just been using with the ZV-E1 quite a lot, and that I do recommend you actually look into. Don't obviously go out and buy it, but consider some of these lenses because they may actually suit your workflow and what you do. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.